a while ago, a couple years ago, I was a ghostwriter, and not for good books, for like the shitty 99-cent Kindle books. And I'm thinking of this because you mentioned...
Romance novels?
Actually, yeah, one or two. One was very gay, one was not.
That's nice.
Yeah, but there was this book. Everybody who has a Kindle account, it seems, has an obsession with passive income. So we got a lot of books about this. And one that I churned out, I swear to fucking God, the title on it was something along the lines of How to Make $1 Million a Year in Passive Income and Relax on a Paradise Beach. Like, just the most absolute bullshit title that you could possibly
Step
comprehend.
1, write this book.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, most of the books, because I was an editor for that company for a while, and a lot of the passive income books that would go through that I would have to check, like, one of the pieces of advice was, like, self-published Kindle books. Like, yeah, it's just absolute bullshit. And I think the idea of passive income is one of the most, like, insidiously misbranded parts of capitalism that people become so obsessed with.
Well, yeah, because you make passive income by being a capitalist. When you own the means of production, when you already have capital, you're creating passive income without doing work because your assets are constantly generating products. They're constantly generating wealth. And if you have a company that's designed to funnel that upwards to you, then you have passive income.
Right, but just that horrible idea that, like, it's passive income, as though there isn't someone actually having to labor to produce that value.
Well,
like,
yeah, because you
that's
created
fucking
jobs.
someone's labor.
No.
It's just not yours anymore.
You created jobs and you're feeding people, Charlie.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. You've convinced me. I forgot about feeding people and creating jobs.
Yeah, that's the most important part, obviously.
That's the thing, too, is that you don't just climb financially, you also climb socially, because there's this really weird, and you see it all the time when, like, some old tweet is dug up and, like, you know, celebrity XYZ is now coming out as a landlord. People simp hard for these people because they're seen as giving something instead of taking something.
Right.
And it's very, like, left 101 type analysis, but I feel like it can't be repeated enough that, like, the idolatry of capitalists is absolutely sickening. The idea that they're giving something to people, whether it be a job or a house, instead of, like, often forcefully seizing control of whatever it is and then doling it out as they see fit.
Well, and that miserable idea they've come up with to justify it that they teach you in like Econ 101, where it's like, well, the reason a landlord is not a parasite is because actually, see, rich people, in order to be rich and to get richer, need to make their money move. And when you make your money stop moving by investing in a house, you're actually giving up the future potential of reaped rewards from making that money move. And so you're actually doing people a favor by providing them an asset that you otherwise, like, it's basically just you deserve a reward for not having, like, invested your money in, like, high risk stocks and gambling than you do for investing in a house. And then, yeah, like you said, left 101 analysis is a house shouldn't be an investment. Someone needs to not die.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is that the entire field of economics, you know, I'm not gonna lie, I was into it for a while because I used to be a Marxist. And any, like, somewhat responsible Marxist usually gets into, like, really objective studies of things that actually aren't that objective, like bourgeois economics included. But one of the things it does is that as liberalism developed and this sort of new, very materialist ideology started to develop, it slowly kind of displaced religion as the, like, leading, like, metaphysical / epistemological method of understanding the world. But just like religion, there's actually kind of a theology for capitalism that exists in economics mostly, but also like liberal political science and things of that nature, that seeks to sort of not just explain but justify and revere the existing political economic order.
That's why there's so many. That's why there's so many books on economics and trying to understand economics, right? And like, that's why so many people point to like, oh, economics. See how it works? It's just supply and demand. Trust me. And it's like, when you get into Marxism at first, I guess, like your goal is to refute everything. Your goal is to be the debate bro, is to win the argument, is to convince people that like, well, this doesn't actually work. Because, you know, for all these like objective reasons, when you can't explain contradictions, you can't unexplain contradictions to people. Like if people have already settled for the contradiction, then it's like it's too late. The bare minimum explaining away of, or the bare minimum like pointing out contradictions is only useful to breaking people into questioning that order, right? Questioning why it's set up that way.
And the thing too is like not to be like an edgy 14-year-old Reddit atheist with this, but like the air of justifications like supply and demand, like market equilibrium, everything of that ilk, it has a very like because God/I said so feeling to it.
Yeah. The
thing is, with stuff like that, if you are sympathetic to the system, you can easily look at it and say, oh, that's why. But if you're not sympathetic to the system, it's also very easy to look at it and say, well, that just seems like a post hoc justification. Like you could have had any result and then use that as the explanation and it would have worked out. I especially get on edge about things like supply and demand because of that. First off, because it's a very unfalsifiable justification, and also because, and this is a more like in-depth note, but like there are other pricing schemes like target profit rate pricing that better fit what actually happens within especially industrial capitalism. But because it does have that theology around it, like we do have these sort of like post hoc unfalsifiable justifications for things like those contradictions you're talking about.
Right. And like that's why we have to do things like control supply and demand through strange policies like, well, grow all the corn you want, we'll just buy up a section of it and just feed it into the market pit so that the supply and demand doesn't become unbalanced, or we'll just launch several like F-18s into the ocean because hey, we spent money, we did the spending, which we made the money move, so good for us. We're literally doing like material sacrifices to the market as a god at this point. And like Silicon Valley to me is absolutely just the end all be all. Like they are the Pentecostals of like market capitalism. They are just absolutely out there being like, I'm doing shit to my body, I am speaking in tongues, I am doing fucking whatever. Like I am just gonna like I'm just gonna do it and people are gonna follow me because it's how you get to divinity. And they're also framing it now in terms of actual like divine crap.
Yeah.
Nancy Pelosi holding the Bible, screaming 0% loans as she waves it at the crowd, and all of the CEOs like fall back in their seats.
I was just gonna say, speaking of the techno divinity, we really do have the tendency of sort of making profits out of the people who do succeed within the system.
Profits.
Yeah, we kind of elevate them in a sense that we would a saint, but we revere only their opinion for future market outcomes.
Kanye's line went up really fast until it didn't.
Yeah. Like people like Warren Buffett, who is a bad example. He's not, a tech mogul. Let's say Bill Gates instead. If you ask Bill Gates what he thinks is going to happen in the market within the next 5 minutes, 5 years, rather, 5 minutes, for some reason, his opinion is worth proportionally more with his dollar value. Like the fact that he managed to succeed within his industry suddenly does kind of turn him into a prophet. Like the things that he say will have a huge impact on the way that the market goes or people's expectations for the market.
Right.
It is a very like prophetizing thing that does sort of add to this sort of like theology analogy that we're building here.
Asking the billionaire with 80% market share, like, how it's going to go. Well, it's going to go exactly the way that I want it to go, and the way that I want it to go is like this.
And then he's a fucking genius.
The story of Microsoft is literally Microsoft spending money so that nobody would use any other product, so that they had market share, so that they were a successful company.
Yeah, that's the thing that blows my mind, too, about most capitalist success stories, Microsoft included, is that people act like they're very bootstrap stories of one person and the sweat on their brow. But, like, speaking of Microsoft, they spent a fuckload of money, but Bill Gates went to Harvard. Like, he already had money, you know, to be like a Trump mocking liberal for a second. Like, it's a very like small loan of $1 million type situation. Like,
absolutely.
Yeah. And then suddenly they're amazing saint-like people for spending things that they already had to make new things happen.
Right. Our Colorado governor, his family just like, he's just a fail son of a family who like, they tell their story and it's all about how like, oh, we were hippies, we lived out of our car, we sold like greeting cards to all these places, and it's like, oh, where'd you meet? It's like, oh, we met at like fucking like whatever Ivy League school they were at, and I'm like, how did you get there? What? So living out of your car was a lifestyle choice, not a necessity, wasn't it?
Hippies are fascists.
Psychic Dolphin Garage.
Welcome to another episode from the Psychic Dolphin Garage. I am Zach. I'm joined by my co-host Charlie.
Hello, Charlie here, she, her.
And we have the Neeper State of Mind podcast on with us today. Gabe, Colt, how are y'all?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Colt. I am the host of Neeper State of Mind, and you also might know me as Friend for Neepers on Twitter. Also the prophet of this generation, and I use they, them.
Good morning. My name is Gabe. I go by Skull Madness on Twitter. That's a Skull Madness with 2 capital I's instead of L's.
Squee Madness.
Long story, don't want to get into it. I'm also on Neeper State of Mind.
This explains why I could not search you on Twitter.
My apologies. There's a bastard out there who's taken my name. He's assuming my identity.
You should do a buyback on Skull Madness.
I've been trying. You don't know how hard I've been trying.
Just messaging that account over and over, emailing the address associated with it. Please, I'll pay you. How much for that?
I've done everything. I think they're dead. I don't know. I'm at a loss.
It's like that episode of SpongeBob where he loses his name tag, but instead of saying like SpongeBob, it just says Squee Madness on it.
Yeah, that's how you pronounce it, Squee Madness.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this episode today. The idea was it's kind of an extension of our last episode that we recorded in the garage with Colt, and it was about capitalist platforms and why are so many chuds on our nice Twitter feeds complaining about us using pronouns in bio, like and we've matured a little bit into just disbelieving the idea of Facebook's existence. It doesn't exist. It's not real.
Yeah, also catch my book release in the second half of 2021 on the non-existence of Facebook.
We'll have an entire podcast series dedicated to it. Dennis is already recording footage of him going around looking for Facebook.
It's just a camcorder video. It's shaky, and it's just him typing in facebook.com, and it's not there.
Just Alex Jones VHS footage, just holding a microphone up to a computer screen. Just, where have you gone? Why have you censored me?
Where's Facebook? Tell me right now. Where is it? And, you know, speaking of capitalist platforms, platform capitalism, the book, you know, we've kind of already talked a little bit about capital in the U.S., a discussion that we definitely don't have every day on Twitter, with new teenagers coming in that have no idea what they're talking about and are trying to test out their ideas and test out my patience.
I think that's the best part of the internet, is that everyone on it is flattened to the age of 20. Like, everyone from the age of 10 to 100 is just 20 now. We're all the same age on the internet.
Yeah.
Every day I live out the unreal arena of opinions with just rando 12-year-olds on Twitter.
We could have radicalized millions, and we have no idea.
Or it's like 3 people, because it's just all their alt accounts that I'm friends with now.
We're slowly training like Russian AI bot nets to be communist again.
Make Russian botnets communist again.
Yeah. You know, we've been reading Platform Capitalism. We kind of We've had it explained very well in Nick Cernisek's book, very well. And so now today we kind of get to blend this all together, discussing, I think specifically, a lot of the companies that are now leaving Silicon Valley, that are leaving California and moving. Unfortunately, it looks like Texas. All of them are either going to Texas or to Tennessee.
Let's say of the 2,000 something companies that have left California, big and small, in the last 4 years or something. Well, really since Trump came to office, which frankly I think is a good sign that they may have gotten the horrible things they wanted out of his presidency, business-wise. That all said, I want to say 300 some odd, a not significant percentage of them are fucking in Texas now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Explain to me, as someone who hasn't read Platform Capitalism, give me a quick little gist of it and what you guys have gotten from it.
Okay. If you look at the the contents of the book.
Mm-hmm.
So Platform Capitalism is so it's Nick Cernisek's book, and it's trying to look at this through basically Marxist lens and go because so the first thing it asks is well, is what you're doing on Facebook labor? And of course the answer it comes to is no. You're not being you're not being extracted from and exploited necessarily. It's just your attention is generating a commodifiable thing that they can sell to advertisers.
Yeah.
The book is a lot about that, and it's also it's a general summary of the idea that the various financial crashes of 2008 and of 1999 and 2000 and all of the ones before that kind of led to this point where you have these massive corporations like Apple and Google with a glut of wealth that they're no longer spending on high interest rates government bonds because there's no reason to spend on low interest rate government bonds. And so they're just funneling shitloads of money in the form of venture capital into startups in order to just try and monopolize chunks of the market, like the way they just funnel shitloads into Uber so that maybe they can put all the taxis out of business and then some rich asshole will own all of the taxi transport services, et cetera, on forever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or until it breaks again.
It opens with discussing financial stuff, and then it goes into the specifics of what we're experiencing today and our slow meltdown that we hit in 2015, I guess.
Yeah.
And so, looking at, during the post-war expansion, they just started producing weapons. The dot-com boom and bust, after that, they just built houses, and then the housing market crashed. And so now they've just monetized all of our data, and data isn't even real. And they're all, and like Charlie said, there's no actual value being built. So it's just companies that can find a way to add more layers and obfuscate our daily interactions in order to have a product.
Right. Just finding new things to financialize and turn into tradable bullshit.
Yeah. And then how all of them have switched from, having massive cloud farms like Amazon, Google, Facebook, Alibaba, and switched to Linktree. It's the lightest weight app you could possibly run on a massive cloud service. You could probably pay $13 to run it on AWS and then just take $50 million in profit from a subscription model that gives access to your app that has more links and doesn't have watermarks or anything. Linktree is the biggest idea of this lean platform, that you don't have any capital invested, you don't own anything, you're just doing a function that people pay you money for.
Right. The book tries to split everything up into there are certain kinds of platforms. There's lean platforms where they're just sort of renting space for really cheap off of all these other things. There are places like Amazon who are trying to invest in the physical infrastructure of the internet. There are ad platforms which are trying to commodify trying to be the portal or the layer that you have to go through to access the internet so that they can command your attention and therefore sell to you, versus industrial platforms where they're trying to say hey, you don't need to own the physical infrastructure of a cloud service, but we can overlay your current manufacturing with something that will reduce your labor costs, et cetera, et cetera. Just all the different features of weaseling your way into the middle to extract money from all these different changes in amassing and accumulating data for the purpose of looking good on a sheet to convince people that your thing is the most valuable thing.
Right. Okay. I think I'm following, yeah. Is the outlook in the application, is it explicitly Marxist, or does it just sound Marxy?
I mean, they explicitly say they're providing a Marxist analysis of whether or not what you do on Facebook is labor, but outside of that, it's just a general analysis. It's just an analysis. It doesn't worry about tendencies.
It's something.
Right.
It's something you can give to anybody that isn't even necessarily leftist, and is a very good explanation of all these phenomena, reframing all these phenomena outside of whatever economics we would understand it through.
You know,
Yeah.
The reason I ask is just because it's interesting to me. I don't want to give our delicate, supple listeners the wrong impression. I wouldn't call myself a Marxist nowadays, but I've read enough Marx to comprehend that, like, what's interesting to me is the fact that this development in capitalism, the sudden growth of our interactions becoming something that can be made into a commodity, it almost feels like an outgrowth of what Marx described as commodity fetishism, which is sort of the turning of our social relations into something by which our sort of like commodity values are compared, and seeing each other in terms of commodity values. It feels like just a further social degeneration, kind of, from what was already increasingly vapid social interactions to something that's fully marketized. It feels like another encroachment of the market onto something that was once apart from it, in a sense, you know, the abstract idea of people communicating and interacting, and that being subsumed by it.
I don't think it's necessarily, like, based on what we read in my own impressions here, I don't think it's necessarily new. It was just significantly more contained. Because, like, the way that people talk about, say, clout online now as, like, a metric of, like, who knows who and how you all get to know each other and how you network on the internet, it feels exactly the same as anything you'd hear in, like, a corporate environment and a corporate structure. It's the way venture capital knows each other. It's the way anyone in person knows each other in a market system, is who do you know? What can you get from that person? Is there having a relationship with this person going to get you toward the thing that you necessarily want? And it just sort of encourages all of us to talk about clout and relationships in that way that previously was just to the realm of, like, the rich or professional. It's a downward motion of the, like, marketization of our cultural experience, while it's an upward motion of all of the capital that can be accumulated from that.
Out of curiosity, does the book mainly focus on the commodity aspect of the metrics themselves, or the way that the interactions themselves are increasingly commodified? Is it more about, like,
I don't think it actually touches on either. I don't think it touches on that, really.
I was just wondering if it was more about the way the data is collected and sold and its uses, or if it's about,
it's more about the data, and more specifically, like, how are they collecting the data? Where are they collecting it from? What is the thing they're using that for? Like, who is the data being sold to, or how is the data being used to convince someone with money that this thing is worth investing in? Because, you know, it definitely addresses the fact that, like, the more data you have, the better you can say your algorithm is at, like, say, marketing advertisements to people. Whether or not it actually is irrelevant. You're still probably doing better than you once were, and then you can just accumulate more data to say it's better, and then someone will pay for it.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I follow. So how does this connect to what you're wanting to talk about today?
So there have been a couple stories over the summer of big folks leaving California. Ben Shapiro is a big one. Ben Shapiro is taking tens of millions of dollars or something, and like 100 employees, and moving to Tennessee. Elon Musk has been very vocal about leaving California for Texas because of COVID regulations.
It's notable, he wants to leave his businesses in California for the moment, but he wants to personally move to Texas, where he can, we can talk about this later. My theory is he wants to let Tesla just kind of flounder and do whatever it does while he expands SpaceX, a thing that will probably be more profitable long term, because that can be useful in Texas, where they've rocket launches and shit. That's a whole separate thing. But Elon Musk hasn't actually moved a business yet, whereas all these other people are threatening to move their businesses, which is notable.
Yep. Joe Rogan got the Spotify deal and is moving. These all tie in because, of course, this is, as discussed in the book, kind of what's your lean platform model. You're reducing your overhead cost. You're not paying as many taxes in Texas as you are in Silicon Valley. You're not having to pay developers $1 million a year because cost of living is insanely high in Texas. You can pay them less.
Right.
You're not having to argue about California infrastructure because you're going to come to Texas and everything will be better. News flash: it's not going to be better. Houston infrastructure is non-existent.
But
all
the
infrastructure is
corporations
non-existent.
won't notice that. Just the people.
They won't notice it because there's also no income tax in Texas. You can also cut budget costs.
And your corporate tax is basically non-existent.
Yeah, corporate tax is also basically non-existent. Like you're cutting your overhead. This is certainly a great move. Not only has there been a massive exodus starting in 2016, nearly 2,000 businesses of varying size have moved from California to Texas.
Mm-hmm.
No, 2,000 have moved anywhere. It's something like 300 that went to Texas.
It's the big ones that are going to Texas.
Oh yeah, no, it's the bigger ones are the ones going to Texas.
Yeah, Oracle, Hewlett Packard, SpaceX.
Yeah, Google, Apple, Facebook, these are all expanding their operations in Austin and have been for several years now.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Apple's had a headquarters there, but they're also looking for jobs, so I know because I applied. All of this is part of not only under the Trump administration, all of their corporate taxes going down, all this money being funneled into them, but also especially now during COVID, they're very quickly moving to consolidate all of their capital, which is great. Charlie, what's the tax in Texas? I think you looked up like some of the specifics of why Texas was a target for some of these big companies.
Oh gosh, I mean, I'm no tax expert on this stuff. I'm having to just slog through this crap. But in California, they're paying like a 8 or 9, like a 9, almost 9% corporate tax off of their profits. And everything else, I think their assets as well, just over the wealth of their company. Whereas in Texas, they're only taxed on the margins, which is basically like you basically get to be taxed on just the profit that you make over the cost of doing business. So if you make a bunch of money, you get to subtract from that the cost of all the goods that you did. So something like SpaceX would do really well in Texas because it's not going to be that profitable over the amount it costs to, say, build and launch a rocket. So what they get to do in Texas is get a bunch of fucking federal dollars to build and launch a rocket for, put something for NASA because they're going to privatize it. And then they get to subtract the cost of building that rocket and launching that rocket and providing that service from their total, the total amount of money their company has, or is worth. And then they're only taxed on the difference, which is basically pathetic. And that's before you subtract all the different deductions you can do based on any number of bullshit. I didn't even dive into that. But your corporate tax in Texas is pathetically small, and it's only basically on the difference of the cost of doing business. So the cost of doing business itself is just fundamentally not taxed.
Nice. You can run a business without being taxed, but God forbid you turn a profit.
Yeah, basically. My cursory examination is this is very beneficial for companies that do manufacturing and have because the whole lean platform thing. This is not so much a company that rents very little and just pays people and provides a service is moving to Texas. This is all of the people who own a shitload of infrastructure are moving to Texas, or people who are doing like financial trading and shit are moving to Texas.
Because their infrastructure is cheaper, the work is cheaper, and as long as they're making jobs that people can work at and extracting their labor from it, then Texas is going to be more profitable for them.
Not much, but some, yes.
It's enough. Like 1% of $1 billion is a lot of fucking money, Charlie.
No, it absolutely is. You're right. Also, like, Texas's budget is like billions, and it's a big state. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that I feel like this is an extension of the fact that COVID has miraculously brought out the very worst of capitalism. Just completely across the board. You see, first off, like, when people don't have to have COVID regulations, a lot of the time they don't. But on top of that, the economic consequences of COVID, it's really an example of capitalism not being able to stand up to, a major externality like COVID, and then everybody who is in a position of power within capitalism shitting their pants and then proceeding to make life worse for everyone they can in order to preserve their position of power.
I mean, it's sort of the nature of crisis, isn't it? Like capital in crisis.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And this is also like what's happened out of every crisis, every downturn we've had is more
reorganization.
Reorganization to extract more efficiently or to extract new resources. And this is certainly a crisis. They're moving to extract more efficiently, and it's also playing into a bunch of mom and pop shops are going under because they already had the platforms that don't make them profit but push them into the realm of getting in between us and the way that we access food and goods. Amazon, DoorDash, Uber Eats are all booming businesses right now.
Right.
And they have no real investment. They're not making anything. There's a platform that you have to go to access things now. And we aren't even hitting the actual slow burn economic crisis that we're going to bottom out into in 2023.
Right. Yeah. What's particularly interesting about the companies that are booming as a result of the COVID crisis is that in some ways they mirror the infrastructure that we should have had to begin with, that would have made this crisis significantly less bad, especially if they were run for the public good. I can't express the amount of times during this whole pandemic that I've pondered, what if we had actually, if we had some kind of, centralized, in lots of brackets, way for handling the production of food, for instance, since you mentioned DoorDash. And then we had an infrastructure in place for taking this food that was intended to, have a long shelf life, that was canned and sorted, several months ahead of time, such that people didn't have to, support the capitalist system during a crisis, keep these businesses afloat, pay the extra overhead for delivery, all of these things. How much of an impact it would have saved if we'd actually had any sort of this is where the social in socialism would really come in. The idea of having these things set up for the public good that would be streamlined under normal circumstances, but that would really save a lot of lives in circumstances like COVID. Going back to the DoorDash example, if we'd had an infrastructure for long-term sustainable food creation and preservation and a means of getting that out to people, who fucking knows? First off, there wouldn't be a lot of people in the service industry losing jobs due to downsizing. But also there wouldn't be nearly as many people who went out to get food and then caught COVID, whatever the fuck happened.
The real problem is, like you said, that there's not a social way to do that. Like I've seen QAnon posts with people being like, there's going to be a massive downturn. Find who you can trade and barter with near you. Create a group that can exchange labor for things because you're going to need it soon. And it's like, I mean, even the fucking crazies see it. Even the crazies see the writing on the fucking wall.
I mean, I would like to give the QAnon people a little bit of credit. They probably have been like prepper adjacent for some time.
Okay,
and
that's
they
true.
do a special fuck you got mine kind of version of prepping where it's like accumulate as much goods as you can now and become the person who trades with others and who has access to the goods. So they're just reproducing the same problem. But they do, at least in general, for the people who don't have massive resources, are like, we should figure out who we can share with.
What's hurt me this entire pandemic is like how everything is stacked against that function. Like the failures of the system are created by the system. Like we can't do that. We don't have any resiliency in feeding people because we have next day delivery. We have 1 million truckers on the road and 18-wheelers every day carrying goods across the United States so that there's just enough to fulfill the orders that they have on the books.
You're saying...
And that's it. And that's the way that we've kept up with...
You're saying basically the shipping and distribution is becoming leaner and leaner and cheaper for the people who are trying to wring profit from it, because instead of trying to make sure we always have a backlog of stuff that we need wherever we might need it, and be ready to ship it wherever it might need to go in an emergency, we just gather a bunch of data to optimize how we ship goods across the U.S. so that everything gets to where it needs to go exactly when it needs to get there, because it's expensive to just keep a backlog and operate a warehouse and ship it when you need it.
Yeah, we couldn't do an 8-week lockdown because we have like 2 weeks worth of goods at any point in time.
Yeah, what you said is actually a very cogent and interesting point about how... I mean, in a sense, it's obvious that the problems of the system are created by the system, but the examples you mentioned are ones that I hadn't considered, like the next day delivery, meaning that we didn't have to prep, months in advance for things like this. And I think it's the perfect example of how, at a system-wide logical level, capitalism is just not sufficient, in the sense that capitalism is so heavily atomized that despite the fact that all of these companies add up to one congealed whole, congealed was a really ugly word to use there.
You're describing capitalism, it's fine.
Yeah. Despite the fact that they all add up to this congealed whole, they and the consumer are only focused on the bottom line at any given time. And capitalism is based off of two assumptions. If you imagine a graph for a second and you imagine like the total production of capitalism, it's based off the assumption that there is no like y bound, right? Like it's based on the assumption that there is no maximum level of production, no upper limit, and also that there is always more X to go. There's always more time, more resources, and more ability to make adjustments on the fly. And it's the on the fly for every single agency and agent within capitalism that really creates the problem, because there is no incentive to think at a systemic level. When both the consumers and the producers are only, which obviously are often overlapping groups, when they're only based around thinking about the bottom line, thinking about how much production needs to happen so as not to cut into profit, and how much a person needs to have so as not to burn through your budget for the month, there's no way to really cooperate on a system-wide scale and plan ahead for these sorts of things. There's no built-in mechanism for actually working together in capitalism, which is probably one of its biggest downfalls. And when there is a system for working together, it is called socialistic, and constantly the funds for it are cut more and more, or they try to misinform the masses about it and, just completely cut out any potential for cooperation.
Right. Planning and cooperation become in themselves things that just sort of filter upwards as singular people have more and more control to determine what cooperation even means in this economy, as they do shit like fix bread prices or put the entire taxi service out of business so they get to decide how much it costs.
Right. And because of this capitalist tendency to always do the thing that gets profit, because fucking duh, when people do cooperate, it is almost always nefarious. And it's for that reason that we have things like antitrust, like duopoly or oligopoly laws in place to actually prevent cooperation, because when cooperation does happen under capitalism, if major corporations were cooperating around the time of the COVID crisis, I can assure all of you that it would not have been to the benefit of the average consumer.
Yeah, I mean, it was already bad enough seeing all the like sales right as the stimulus checks hit that were like, get a new couch today, only $1,200.
Right.
It's like that, buddy.
Right.
I don't think that's what that check is for.
Well, and also they cooperated fucking hardcore to just rally around lobbying Congress to make sure that that $1.5 trillion from the Fed just keeps getting recycled in and out every single day, so they can cover all their balances and make the balance sheets look good, so the fucking number go up.
Right. And the amount of misinformation that happens under capitalism, like, there's a project that I talked about that I was doing last time I was on here, and I've long since scrapped it because as I've matured and my like desire to actually go into academia has matured, I've realized that there was just too much coming from me and not enough pulling from other work in that. So I kind of scrapped it. But one of the things that I did talk about and that I still think about is the massive way that the working class is misinformed constantly by the propertied class. And historically, there are obvious examples like the development of, racism against black folks in America. And even with this, the ability of the Republican Party, of course, Democrats had a hand in it too, but a lot of the like anti-quarantine, like we have to keep the economy moving talk came from Republicans. And it's such a manipulative thing because the grasp that the Republican Party has, for instance, on the working class in America is predicated on the fact that about 40 years ago, the sort of new trend of hyper-conservative Christianity came about. And that came about when, during the 1980s and the 90s and the late 70s, the rich realized that there was a lot of voting potential in the working class of America, and they realized that a lot of them were religious. So they decided to manipulate the religion and then sneak in all of the like economic talking points that actually benefit them that people don't understand. They make them sound just nice enough to slip them under. And then they actually get those votes based on the religious population. And because of the manipulation of religion against the Christian working class in America in the 80s, it's developed this sense of trust that these people who clearly don't represent their interests actually do. And that goes through and extends into today, where, for instance, my mom is a very Christian lady, a very like Fox News lady at that. And she, despite being in fragile health generally, if she caught COVID, she would probably die. She's one of those people. But she was also one of the people saying that we needed to not have a quarantine because of this mass manipulation by the property class, taking advantage of the things that are important to people on the ground, especially the things that are most sacred to them personally, such that they can use it to their own benefit, every death be damned. It's just this long trend of manipulation. And I think that the mass manipulation of the working class that happened during the COVID pandemic, attempting to get people to end the quarantine for the sake of profits, for the sake of keeping the gears turning, is one of the most disgusting and purely capitalistic things that's happened in probably since the war in Iraq, honestly.
Yeah, there's lots of media and a whole nother episode's worth of discussion on like how representatives, how politicians, how companies have taken these aesthetics that are built into people of this puritanical, like working, hardworking people that just want people that, believe in God and believe in good things for our country, and directed it into that. But not only is it disgusting that that was the byline, but what's disgusting is that they started that at the beginning. They did enough of a quarantine that it was like, ooh, it's a quarantine. We're locked down. Nobody can go outside, while keeping everything basically fucking open.
Yeah.
And then because it wasn't successful, they said, see, the quarantine didn't work. Why would we do a second one if the first one didn't work? It's like, you think I'm stupid. You think I'm fucking stupid. You think that I do not know how many fingers I have on both of my hands. I look at them and I go, 1, 2, 4, 5. I don't, okay, motherfucker? Like, that's...
The thing is, they do think you're fucking stupid, and that's such a common thing.
100%.
And if we're gonna diagnose them, like, that is 100% just, that's narcissism. Like, everyone who is a capitalist is able to get past that idea of extracting from people because of narcissism, because it's built into their psyche that they have to do that because they can. They're better.
But
I'm built different.
Oh, I was going to say, I think an important thing to remember here, though, is that, like, you know, most working people aren't sitting there clamoring for things to, you know, reopen again. Like, the middle classes and the conservative, suburban, especially Trump-style voters, like, we saw lots of them gathering and being like, I don't care. I want to fight for this, that, and the other. Like, their class status, they have a lot of comfort. They don't have a lot of discomfort. They're not used to this shit. They want their fucking haircut. They want, like, you know, their freedom to consume again. Like, it's the fact that, like, the pandemic really doesn't affect them. They have a Cadillac healthcare plan. They have a remote work job now. They have what they need.
They're still working. They still have to work. They don't own their capital, but they're the consuming class.
Yes, and that class is very much into, you have to let me keep consuming. That's like my one freedom. But when it comes to, like, working people, like, you know, working people, a wide variety of opinions about what we're being lied to about. But, you know, people aren't just sitting there saying, like, oh, I think we have to reopen the economy. They're saying, I gotta fucking pay my rent. If you're telling me the only way I can fucking pay my rent is to go back to work at the last fucking Pizza Hut in the world and just do that and deliver on Grubhub now, like, whatever, that's what I'm gonna fucking do to pay the rent, because I don't want to be on the fucking street. It is that to a large extent. And people were saying, we need stimulus, we need relief, we need something, we need you to pay the fucking rent for us, you need to suspend rent. Like, people are generally like, just it generally comes down to two things, which is either they're saying they should give me some fucking money to pay my rent so it's not dangerous and we get through this, or they're saying, I don't know what else we do. They're not, I guess what I'm trying to point out is that, like, the conversations I'm having with people are not, I think we should reopen the economy. The conversations I'm having are, I don't know what else there is. Just do the thing that keeps me the most likely alive.
Right. If I may, two things. The first being what you said about the last Pizza Hut on Earth. I know earlier we were talking about VeggieTales with human faces being our movie idea, but I'm superseding that pitch. I want to do a horror movie about the last Pizza Hut on Earth, and I want it to star Zach Braff.
Okay.
The second thing is what you're saying about people. I think you're right in the general sense. I think that if it weren't for this, like, puritanical work ethic, that a lot of people, given the decision to not work and have the same standard of life, would probably do that, because fucking duh, like, that's the thing we should all be aspiring to. I think this is the second time I've said fucking duh in this podcast.
Say
like,
it again.
Fucking
you're right.
Duh. But the thing is, what Zach was saying, like, do they think I'm stupid? They don't think you're stupid. They think you're easily manipulable. If I can go back to my mom, because I'm a mom as they, like, last September, I want to say, there was some...
Mama's baby.
Yeah. It sounds like namaste. It's not. There was some kind of, like, bullshit at her last job. I don't remember. But basically, she was forced to resign. So that was last September. Fast forward a little bit. It's March. She still hasn't found a new job. Because, you know, that is Northwest Arkansas. It's in this weird place between, like, Southern agrarianism and, like, the post-industrial malaise of the Midwest. Like, there's no fucking work for someone who has an associate's degree. And COVID hits, and she is struggling month to month. She cannot make her bills. She's maxing out her credit cards just to keep her house, stuff like that. And the thing is that people, to shift gears for a second, I think that if you try to imagine something, just as a thought experiment, to be like a pretentious philosophical person for a second, if you try to imagine something that's completely disconnected from anything you've heard before, you'd probably find it very, very difficult. The thing is that the parameters for what we're able to imagine and see within the world, or want to see within the world, are defined by the things that we've kind of understood up to that point. So if somebody had only for their whole life heard, anti-socialist, heavily like puritanical capitalist rhetoric, then, their solution for things, especially if what they're hearing is, this quarantine isn't working, is just let us work again. You just have to work through the disease, like people, the flu happens every fucking year. We don't stop everything for that, shit like that. But the thing is, this is a very common premise for capitalist manipulation. And you can see it in, Britain right now at the NHS. For the last 30, 40 years, they've been slowly cutting the NHS, and now Tories are talking about slowly getting to the point of talking about privatizing it, because they've been cutting it for years to make it seem like it's insufficient, like it's not doing its job, so that they can replace it with a profitable alternative. So what happened with COVID was that we had a shitty quarantine, and the other thing is we never had regulations to prevent some of the worst parts of a situation like this. Like, there were no, on a federal level, there was no nationwide complete mortgage / rent freeze. There was no sort of infrastructure in place to get people food money, to get people through these months. There were 2 or 3 shitty stimulus packages over 9 months. So people were stuck in a position where there were no accommodations for them. They hadn't had the pre-existing experience to actually imagine a solution to these problems that doesn't involve just working through it, getting a shitty paycheck each week. So when push comes to shove, and they're hearing these people who've already co-opted their trust through past manipulations, when they're hearing these people say, this isn't working, then those people do seem pretty fucking stupid. But the reality is that the propertied class just knows how to manipulate these people. They know how to manipulate appearances, and appearances are all that matters. They know how to make it seem like these things aren't working, and we just need to gut every effort and go back to what we know. And right. That's the other thing is... Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm just trying to defend the people here. I totally get what you're saying, and I don't disagree that we are generally being manipulated. We are being told what to think, and we are having the scope of our imaginations and futures enclosed as much as possible, because that is more profitable to have it that way. Right. I guess I'm just trying to defend the people that they know they're being manipulated. They know they're being screwed. They don't always necessarily know the person who's doing it. Sometimes it's misplaced. A lot of the time they know exactly who it is. But it's just there's a level of just I still have to eat. I know I'm being screwed. I know this sucks. I want to eat. I want to have my rent paid. That's just what's relevant. And it's
absolutely.
But, they know exactly they're being screwed. And and also it's like you said, the government was lying to them outright. They said at the beginning, don't wear a mask, because they were we're not going to produce enough of those things to give to everyone. So let's just say you don't need one. And then they shift later to, actually, you do need one now that we have enough to go around if you can afford one and find one. And then we all just fucking made them at home out of shirts and shit, because it's all we had.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but like, yeah, no, they're being lied to constantly for the sake of whatever is directs profit and production. Like there is a planned economy. It's basically, you can know what it is by what you're being lied to about. Like, they're planning on not making masks because that's not profitable, because they don't want me to have one. And then they must have found a way to profit off of masks because they're telling me to have one.
No, that's a really like funny and interesting phrase that I'm going to keep in mind, that there is a planned economy and you know what it is by what they are and aren't talking about. I think you're right to say that. And I want to make it clear, I'm sure you know this, and I want to make it clear to anybody listening, I'm not condemning those people or their position. I think that actually a lot of people do recognize that they're being fucked over. And I think that's also part of the reason that, you know, Alex Jones's conspiracy-laden bullshit caught on so much, and why, like, the Western world, but America in particular, seems to have this preoccupation with conspiracy theories. Because
I love that shit.
Yeah, because
frankly,
you know that, I mean, me too. I feel like you kind of have to love conspiracy theories to be a communist. Like, but the thing is, you know that things aren't as they seem. You're smart enough to kind of be able to, like, know that there is a curtain to peek behind. But you don't know what's behind it. And you have all of these. First off, you have, like, literally every part of the infrastructure, the educational infrastructure, the media dissemination infrastructure, all of it is geared to get you to think that a certain thing isn't behind it. And then you add to that the fact that I don't necessarily, I come from a sort of postmodern background. I don't like to pass value judgments on things just willy-nilly. That's one of the problems I have with a lot of the first generation cultural Marxists, like fucking Marcuse and people like that, is they like to make value judgments.
Sorry?
Like Herbert Marcuse and like fucking there's one other guy, he's slipping my mind, that's really famous, and he fucking hated jazz. Yeah. But the thing is, I find it iffy to make holistic value judgments about culture without some sort of actual tangible, not necessarily reality, because that's also an iffy term, but like without something to back it up. But I do think that the fact that our culture so closely mirrors the method of consumption we've gotten used to, the instantaneous gratification that we've gotten used to, is because we're entering into, and we've already been in for a while, a world of constant clogging and distraction, where all of the channels brainwash you into thinking a certain thing, and then the other ones are meant to keep you from thinking too much about it. It's actually funny. Every pillar of modern life as an American laborer almost seems like it was intended to keep you from subverting it.
Yeah.
The fact that you work long hours and you're too tired to do anything, so you just watch some brainless bullshit or binge some series and go to sleep, repeat. The fact that there's no mental health infrastructure, so you can't talk about your problems, and the fact that even within that mental health infrastructure, there's been a really strong move away from like subjective theory, like psychoanalysis, toward like objective task-based theory. It just feels like everything is engineered to keep people from actually thinking about the system critically. And I think that plays a huge part in setting the stage for events like COVID and the resultant political, economic outcomes of it. I don't in any way condemn people for knowing but not knowing that something's going on. And a lot of the time I don't necessarily condemn them when they come to a wrong conclusion, even though, you know, obviously I'm going to, the old Trotsky, like, acquaint the fascist head with the sidewalk quote. But, like, I think that there is, I think the point I'm trying to make is that we're using a platform right now. And this is an opportunity to, you know, if the episode's good enough, if it gets shared, to get it out to people who maybe haven't heard these things before. The people who are in positions like we're talking about right now with your friends that you've talked to and my mom who I've talked to, who seem to all know that there's something going on and they might not be able to correctly identify it, but we can put the best argument forward. We can be the teaching opportunity for these people to understand COVID's dangerous, obviously, and the reason that things didn't quite go like they should have are both systemic and not necessarily preventable, but they can be fixed, not quickly, and not without a lot of effort by the people who have looked behind the curtain. But it's doable. I think recognizing, and I'm about to end this ramble, I think recognizing that these people don't exactly know what's behind the curtain is one of the most important steps, and then being honest about it. Because from there, we can augment the argument with what is behind the curtain and what we can do about it.
Howdy, y'all. Don't forget to follow our link tree in the show notes to discover new things like our Discord, social media platforms, and all the places where you can listen to our podcast. Word of mouth is the best way to introduce us and other leftist creators to friends, family, coworkers, your AA buddies. Community is about more than hot takes online. And if you want to support our efforts, you can donate to us at patreon.com/psychicdolphingarage, which is spelled how it sounds. Hope to see you on the stream tonight. Enjoy this music by JJ Demon.
How the fuck I still got a full head of hair? Not a single gray. Fuck the cops, family first, every single day. Bringing a charm when I ring the alarm. My arms got a box cutter insignia. We gotta abolish ice, we gotta abolish ice, abolish it. No need to apologize, the Holocaust abolishes. For no reason we colonize the land and put up monuments. Dope needles, dollar signs, the globe stands in astonishment. I hope there'll be a punishment. I really wanna get bloody. I really wanna stand in judgment of anybody taking money from anybody in the struggle. Anybody on a budget. Poor people getting 10 to 20 for some dumb shit. Corporations incorporating a bloodlet. Mark my fucking words, this coup will not be bloodless. Mark my fucking words, this coup will not be bloodless. Mark my fucking words, this coup will not be bloodless. Mark my fucking words, this coup will not be bloodless. Mark my fucking words, this coup will not be bloodless. Mark my fucking words, this coup will not be bloodless. Mark my fucking words.